Hey listeners, welcome to Grit and Growth, where we explore what it really takes to achieve excellence in sport, leadership, and everyday life.
We're talking mindset, character, and faith in action. The daily pursuit of becoming your best in every arena.
I'm Justin Simpkins, founder and director of Prairie Hockey Academy, storyteller, passionate about growth, and reader of books on leadership and personal development.
And I'm Shane Sowden, head coach of Briarcrest men's basketball, a mentor to coaches and youth who believes leadership starts with the heart and grows through purpose.
Hey, we've been friends for over 15 years, and this podcast builds on conversations that we've shared with each other and with mentors, coaches, and leaders who have helped shape us along the way.
So get ready to rise to a higher level of excellence.
You're listening to Grit and Growth. Let's dive in. Today's episode with Brian Smith is packed with a pile of information for parents and coaches. Student athletes, you're going to enjoy it as well. But as parents, I think it spoke to me a lot about just learning how to speak identity into the people that we lead, our athletes, whether as a parent or as a coach, letting them know that they have what it takes, that they are enough on their own. And that when we're leading an elite athlete, that learning that if that's our child, those kids need to actually drive the bus for their own athletic development, and opposed to us putting the pressure and the fear on them. Connecting with our athletes and not correcting them on the drive home, there's a lot of takeaways in today's episode. Our guest today is Brian Smith. He writes and speaks for Athletes in Action. It's a global Christian sports organization that helps athletes, coaches, and parents integrate faith and character into competition. Brian is also a coach in high school cross country in Michigan, and he helps coaches and parents build character, not just scoreboard wins. We dig into what it takes to keep joy alive in athletics, how coaches become real leaders, and how parents can shift from pressure to purpose. If you're like me, there's going to be a lot of self-reflection that happens in this episode for you. I felt it was really challenging for me and at the same time encouraging, giving me a bit of a script and a pathway forward as I lead my young athletes at home. Brian, welcome to the Grit and Growth podcast. We're really thrilled to have you. I know that in reading some of your content, you've got a lot of messages that our listeners will benefit from. So welcome here.
Yeah, fellas, thanks for having me. Excited to be here talking with you.
I just want to jump into it. I know on this podcast, we talk lots about, building character in sport and the scoreboard that matters and transformational coaching and different pieces. And I know that you've written about a lot of these. One piece that's really jumped out to me is how do we keep joy alive in athletics? And I think you've got a message there to share.
Yeah, how do we keep joy alive in athletics? I think one of the ways it starts is we, especially as like Christ following people, we really need to be connected to the source of all joy, which is God. And so if we're trying to find satisfaction apart from God, it's always going to be like chasing this dangling carrot. And so I think that is part of it. I think all athletes are chasing some sort of, we might use the word like satisfaction. The Bible would probably use a word like contentment, but there's always going to be a connection between Jesus and contentment, especially in the New Testament. And so yeah, for athletes who are wanting to rediscover or maybe start playing with joy, I would say the first thing is you need to figure out what does it look like to actually integrate God into your sport instead of having it be two separate things. It's probably one of the biggest danger is probably not the right word to say, but I would say it's maybe one of the shortfalls of a lot of people who are trying to implement faith in sport is we just don't know what does it look like to integrate the two. And I think the more athletes can do that, the more that they would experience joy. Because ultimately joy there's a lot of conversations about this, like how it's different than happiness. Happiness is tied to circumstances. And so you win the Stanley Cup, you're happy because you won. Joy can still be had even if you lose something like the Stanley Cup because it's attached to something much more transcendent than just a circumstance. So all that to say, it starts with our relationship with God. If we can figure out how to keep him at the center of everything we're doing, including sport, it positions us to experience the joy that he would have for us in it.
So, I love that definition, especially the comparison between joy and happiness. Like you just said, what that looks like is our challenge. You got any tangible examples of what that might look like? Like you're a running coach, right? Cross country. Mm-hmm. What does that for our listeners there? Like, what does What does that practically look like?
Yeah. I'm we're like 3 days away from the biggest meet of the season for our team. Um, and as a coach, one of the things that I'm trying to figure out, this is my second season coaching them, is um, I want them to do well, but I also want them to run from a position of knowing that even if it goes horribly on Saturday, um, that I'm still going to love them, that my relationship with them doesn't change based on their performance. And so I think for athletes, man, what would it look like for us to know and better understand how God views us as a son or a daughter, that a lot of what we chase in sport, we already have in Christ. And so the peace that we're looking for, the joy we talked about that we're looking for, the hope that we're looking for, God has already promised all of those in Christ. And so, yeah, getting really practical. What does that look like? It means before the race, I want, especially my Christian athletes on my team, I want them to have some sort of anthem, some sort of inner mantra where they're saying, God, would you help me to just experience the joy of running with you today? Would I put aside all comparison with other people? Would I completely empty myself out on the course today, knowing that my identity does not come from a time or place, but it ultimately comes from you? And so, God, with this understanding of who I am with you, would I be able to run free? And I think that that's really like on the practical side, if we can get athletes to understand what it looks like to play with freedom instead of fear, I think then you get a little bit more closer to joy. And so even on the practical side, maybe thinking of like what causes us to play with fear might be a more helpful exercise than figuring out practically what does it look like to play with joy. Because I think if we can get rid of some of the things that cause us to play with fear, I think God created us to be joyful people, and our default should be joy. Oftentimes we're just playing under fear. So that's another side of the conversation is, man, what is it? What are those things that we are playing for that God would say, no, that's an unhealthy motivation. And that's preventing you from actually playing with joy.
And this is good. And I think, even for our listeners' sake, Brian, I know you started working with Athletes in Action in 2008. And so some of our athletes or parents that may be introduced to Athletes in Action or know of them might know of them from like chaplain programs from their local junior hockey teams
Yeah.
or sporting teams or things like that, and that chaplain individual has a role, but your role inside of Athletes in Action is even like a content creator and maybe even unpacking some of this stuff that we're talking about so that you can empower those chaplain programs. I think that's important just for the context of, as you're talking here, for our listeners to understand some of where you're coming from. But I mean, you open the door there a little bit. It's like, well, what in your experience, in Brian, and what you're writing about to help athletes, what is it that causes fear in their playing?
Yeah. And so just to give you more background, I'm coming at this from somebody who's played sports their entire life. I ran track and cross country at a Division I level in college here in the US. I spent some time coaching at a Division I level track and cross country at University of Wisconsin. Since joining staff with Athletes in Action, I spent the first 10 years actually at Wisconsin as what you talked about, essentially a chaplain to the college athletes there. And so I've been around sports my entire life as an athlete, high level athlete, as a coach, from anywhere from Division I level in college to the youth level, and now I'm coaching high schoolers, and then at a ministry level too. And so I've just been around it a lot. Man, what are some of the biggest things that cause us to play with fear? I think the biggest thing, honestly, is the opinions of other people. Like, man, what would it look like if things like social media didn't exist and we didn't feel this like urge to post everything we're doing so we can get other people's approval? Or what would it look like if I believe in coaching, let me say that, but what would it look like if we didn't even have coaches telling us what to do, or our parents weren't watching everything? What if we could just play like little kids used to play, right? Like what if we could
It
just
would
get
look
rid
like
of
Sandlot. That's what it would look like.
Yes, it would look like the Sandlot, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. Like, man, can we get back to this sense of play and not performance? And that, yeah, performance is so tied to others' approval as well. If you think about like when people ask you about your sport, they don't say what sport do you perform. They say what sport do you play. But man, how many of us the whistle goes off and it becomes this performance where we just so care about what other people think. And I honestly think that hinders us from becoming the best athlete that God would want us to be. And I don't want to like over spiritualize this either, but I just think for myself, when I am running and I'm fearful of what like I didn't have the greatest high school coach. He coached out of fear. When I'm running, knowing that, man, if I have a bad race, he is going to ream me out and most likely call me out in front of the entire team. It prevents me from being loose and joyful, and it prevents me from maybe being a little bit creative and wanting to take risks in races that I haven't taken before. And when I'm playing sports and unable to take risks and be creative, it hinders my performance because I can't actually have the freedom to fail and learn from that, which will hopefully help me get better the next time.
Mm-hmm.
What you just said reminds me, like a few years ago, I used to show the movie I used to be a phys ed teacher, and I'd show Chariots of Fire to my students. And Eric Liddell, when I run, I feel his pleasure. And I've had conversations with some of my players this year as we get our season going here. And we've almost had to have like, hey, basketball's fun. Like, yes. We get to go compete. We get to hang out.
So much more fun than running. It's so much more fun than running.
Well, I know. Like, I played when I played Division I baseball in college, I felt more like a cross country runner because back then they would just make us run like 30 miles a week and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, are we the cross country team or are we the pitching staff? Like, what's going on? Anyways, and I didn't feel a lot of pleasure back then. I think I experienced the runner's high once in my life, and it's real. It's just really hard to get there, and it sucks. But it's just like this reminder of, hey, we started doing this because there was joy hitting a ball in the backyard, shooting a basket, hearing the ball go through the net, that sort of thing. And I feel like we've lost that. And is it just, I think it's something we have to talk about. Is it just something we need to revisit, or is it something we can tangibly, are there practices in our life to help us remind us like this is fun?
Yeah. I mean, I think, yes, all of the above. We need to realize just how the landscape of sports has changed over the last really probably 20 to 40 years, that we have just collectively as a culture taken professionalized sports and placed that over the college level, the high school level, and now we even place that over the youth level. So we've professionalized just about everything. And what do I mean by that? It means we've elevated it to a much bigger deal than sport really is. We're encouraging young athletes to specialize at a young age. We're telling them things like winning is all that matters. We're having conversations like, what's your legacy when you're done? Like even after this World Series ends, which we talked about before the podcast started, the question will be not how great the Blue Jays or the Dodgers are. It'll be where they stack up against the all-time greats and can they do it again next year? And so we've even lacked the ability as a culture to just enjoy championships and winnings. It's always got to be placed against a greater context. And again, we're doing that at the college level, the high school level, the youth level. And what's happening is kids they're embodying this type of pressure, and it's not becoming fun anymore. Like we have I'm not sure what the stat is in Canada. In the US, 70% of kids quit sports by the age of 13 because they're no longer fun. Why are they no longer fun? Us. It's the adults. We have professionalized everything, and the kids are telling us, I'm done it's not fun anymore. So I had an interesting experience a couple weeks ago. I have 3 kids. One is a freshman in high school. He's got 4 buddies that come over to our house often, and they were doing a fantasy football draft that night. And before the draft started, they like climbed up on top of our garage roof. And I was in the backyard doing some other things, and I was just watching them to see what they were doing. And so these are like, they're all fairly mature kids. They're really good at their different sports. There's like a high school quarterback, a stud wrestler, baseball player, and a couple other dudes who are just really good. And they were playing, no joke, they're playing Duck, Duck, Goose on the top of my garage roof. So, but like, and it's stupid and it's silly, but the question is why? Why were they doing that? Because that's what kids do. If kids have the opportunity to play and have fun, even if they're fresh, like even if they're 16 years old, they're going to find ways to have fun. It's honestly, guys, it's us as the adults who have squashed fun. Part of me was even like, you guys shouldn't be doing that. You're going to get hurt for your season. But like, that's what we as adults do. I've experienced it even as a youth sports coach, as kids these are like 10 to 12-year-olds playing basketball. What do they want to do? They want to throw half-court shots and see if they can make any. Like that's a fun practice for them. For me, I'm like, that's not going to get you better as an athlete. Everybody needs to line up and practice our left-handed layups for at least 10 minutes. And yes, like there needs to be a marriage between let's teach the fundamentals. Let's actually do what's going to make you better as a basketball player. Or are we creating space for them to throw half-court shots, making sure they don't hit their teammates in the head who are underneath the basket? But are we as adults and coaches making space for the occasional silliness that should accompany sports?
You're making me feel a little bit better about our shoot around routine on game day, because just when we're in an opposing gym, we have like this drill. It's like you make 20 layups, 15 middies, 10 threes, and then it's a competition. You got 2 teams at each end, and then the guy's like, and do we get to do 2 half court shots? And I was like, and you can just see, like, I got these 22-year-olds.
Yep.
That's the most, they want to get to that part. Right. Yep. So, and they're like, yeah, of course. Right. But if they don't make one in a few minutes, I'm like, right, we're moving on. But it's like,
it's fun, right? It's fun. Yes.
Yeah. They want to, I'm like, this has to be like, there's so much pressure on them already, whether it's self-inflicted or not. It's like, yeah, just, go be a 10-year-old again, for 2 minutes. Right. And then let's get into the game prep and going through the scout. Right.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be an either or. And I think that's where we trip up. It doesn't have to be all or nothing in either direction. There should be a marriage between, hey, let's teach sport the way it's supposed to be taught. And let's do the fundamentals. Let's make sure we understand the plays. Let's do all that stuff. But let's find ways to make it really fun for kids. Because sport is a beautiful, beautiful gift from God. The statistic of 70% quit by the age of 13, that's concerning for me. Yeah. Like, especially at I have 3 kids who are getting close to or past that age. I don't have any vision that they're going to play sports in college, but man, I want them to play sports as long as they possibly can. It would sadden me if they quit before they've even hit their physical peak, because I've contributed to an environment where sports is not fun for them any longer. Man, I want sports to be as fun for as long as possible for them. Because I really believe that's how God intended it to be. God intended for us to play and enjoy games.
Hey listeners, be sure to check out our upcoming book, Significance Over Success. It's a collection of lessons and stories that dive even deeper into what it means to grow with purpose. Hey, it's Justin here. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I'm a coach, a husband, and a father to 3 busy kids. A couple years ago, one of our daughters was really struggling with her sleep and her breathing and crowding in her mouth. At that point in time, we started looking into things that could help her. And I'm proud to say that we came across a company called Sask Mile. The team at Sask Mile was incredible with our daughter in helping us figure out a solution for her health. The team at Sask Mile made a real difference in her life, in her breathing, in the crowding in her mouth, and in her airways overall. My daughter's back to sleeping better, not grinding her teeth at night, and being able to just breathe. which goes a long way in her physical development. If you have a child that you're concerned about, whether they're snoring, mouth breathing, grinding their teeth at night, struggling with feeding, or just overall mouth development, take my advice. Reach out to saskmayo.com. Their team there will offer consultations and incredible help for you. That's saskmayo.com, saskmyo.com. We've talked about that 70% stat on here before. I know Joe Ehrman quotes it in one of his book called Inside Out Coaching, and it was a big piece that really motivated me. And it was like to be a transformational coach, because he's taking it from a coaching lens, right? He's going, I think he even says North America, Brian, in his book, I think. But he says they quit because they're not having fun, and they cite things like emotional, verbal abuse, right? Mental, that kind of thing. So just, again, we're really transactional. We're leading with fear as adults and, as coaches and stuff like that. And we beat that and unpacked that quite a bit on here. But you're right. There's things that we can do, and allowing our kids the freedom to have free play, to be kids and have fun. And sometimes we gotta take a step back as both parents and coaches, volunteer or paid, in regards to how structured do we really need to be? Because isn't it more important that they learn to love the game and just to laugh and have fun when they come into our arena? That's used to be a big goal.
Yep.
You talked a bit about prepping your athletes here even before this big race. And I think I think what you were saying is a quote that we have here as well. It's front end grace. It's a quote from your book, or you talk about using front end grace to remind kids that nothing that happens today changes my love for you. That comes from the Christian Athlete. I think you said that a bit, but I think is that what you're saying? And I think as parents, maybe unpack that a little bit of how you think we should be using that.
Yeah. I mean, what is grace? It's a free, undeserved gift. And so it's something that has been given to us that we don't deserve. But it is something that, like with any good gift, it needs to be accepted and embraced. So front end grace is the idea of it is before a competition or a practice, really anytime our kids or athletes that we're coaching, that before they go out to play, to do something, we want to make sure that they are playing, competing from identity and not for identity. And so it's just a reminder of like, hey, whatever, like you just said, whatever happens today, you and me, we're good. Especially if this is a parent and kid relationship. So for my kid, it's like, man, buddy, I love you. Nothing that happens today is going to change that. So go let it rip today. Like, let's see what you can do. Go risk. Go try something that you've never tried before. Let's see if we can take that game to a next level. And whether you actually get there or fall flat on your face, I'm here for you. I love you, and I enjoy watching you play. There was an instance where I completely screwed this up. Can I share a story of youth sport coaching for you?
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah. My freshman now, when he was maybe 10 years old, he was playing in a youth football game as a wide receiver. I was a coach at the time of his team. We were down a touchdown with there might have been 10 seconds left, and we had the ball at the 50-yard line. And so if you're coaching 10-year-old, it's really hard to go 50 yards in 10 seconds. It's not going to happen. And so it wasn't me. It was probably one of the other coaches who, like, let's call a Hail Mary and just see what happens. Again, 10-year-olds, you can only throw the ball like 10 yards. And so you're not going to get where you need to go. My son Hudson's a wide receiver. His cousin was the quarterback, launched it 10 yards, hits Hudson on the top of the helmet, bounces up, and the other team intercepts it. Game's over. And so I'm going to the middle of the field because he's like sitting there, and I know he's frustrated. And these are the moments that I live for as a Christian parent of, I want to communicate also back end grace of like, hey buddy, I love you. I know you tried your best there. It didn't work out. And so I was all prepped to say the right thing in that moment. And I get there and he's got tears in his eyes. And so the first thing I say is, buddy, what's going on? What's wrong? And he looked at me and he said, Derek said I lost the game for our team and he's being a real butthead. And like just something came over me in that moment of, I looked at him and I was like, did Derek score any touchdowns today? Did Derek catch any passes today? Did Derek have any tackles today? And he was like, no, he didn't. And then in one of my least fine moments of all coaching and parenting, I literally like got down on a knee next to him and I looked at him and I was like, if anything, Derek probably lost the game for our team, right? Which is horrible, horrible. But it made him feel better in the moment. But what was I doing there? I was teaching my son that the way I see him is compared to how other people in that game play. And for him to, in that moment, again, I have not done this with the rest of my life, so he hasn't embraced this. Hopefully I haven't done that. But if I have repeat over repeat over repeat interactions like that, he's going to make the very clear distinction that dad loves me most when I play better than other people on my team. That the way I get affection and attention from dad is when I play better than buttheads like Derek. And man, that I don't want my son or the kids I coach to go into competitions thinking like the only way we're going to get the affection of dad or our coach is if things go well today. Man, I hope things go really well, but I need to be really cautious that my affection for them is not dependent on performance. Again, I feel like we just keep coming back to this. That's dependent on me though to communicate that front end grace, because the rest of sport culture is not going to give you that front end grace. The rest of sport culture is going to say, if you want to be anybody, you need to go out there and perform for it and get it. If you win, you're a winner. If you lose, you're a loser or a choke artist. And even if you win, you got to go do it again the next week. Man, as Christian sports people, we need to communicate the gospel. We need to communicate differently than that.
You hit on something there, and it's like, first of all, being a parent is hard.
Yeah.
And whenever your kids are in a club or a team or something like that where they're performing something, like it's hard, it's difficult. Just want to can you speak to your messaging there after the game? To those parents in the stands, maybe it's the dad or mom who's coaching, whatever, pre-competition, post-competition conversations. And I'm asking this because I've again been coaching for 23 years, numerous conversations with my athletes. And one of the things that comes up repeatedly, whether it's been my players that I'm coaching that are teenagers, like 13, 14-year-old baseball players or college basketball players, one of the things they dread is the pre or post game conversation with mom and dad on the drive to or from the field, rink, whatever, gym. Can you just speak to that, just the power of that moment? Because my players are always just like, my dad will call me and he gives me all these things I did wrong, and it just deflates them. And they know they mean well, but they dread it.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's important to point out too, Shane, is that we're talking about, for the most part, right, well-intentioned parents who have been discipled by an ESPN culture, which teaches us to overanalyze and critique and coach everything. And so I feel the tendency in my own heart as I drop my kids off at practice, hey, remember when you get off the line today to do this, or hey, remember when coach puts you in to make sure you do this. And it's well-meaning coaching tips. But man, the research tells us our kids just want to play. I think that's one of the big mistakes we make as parents is well-intentioned. We want our kids to be the best possible athlete they can be. And to do that, they need all of the right information. And we feel this obsessive need to give them this information whenever possible. Man, our kids just want to play. They just want to go out there and learn on their own. So on the front end, let's communicate front end grace. but let's maybe save the coaching tips and just see if they can figure some of this stuff out on their own. Ultimately, like kids who are creative, who fail and learn, they're going to be much better off than the ones who just become robots doing exactly what their parents told them beforehand to do. Like, we want our kids to be athletic and to think on their feet, but the way they're going to do that is they need to think on their own.
Yeah.
Man, on the backside, a lot of researchers have pinned this 70% stat. Again, 70% of kids quit by the age of 13. They have pinned it on how parents handle the car ride home.
Wow.
They pinned it on how parents handle the car ride home. And there's some psychological backing behind this. Psychologists call it the peak end rule. And the peak end rule is telling us that we as humans largely remember events in our life by the peak moment of that event, and then how that event ends. So the peak moment and then how it ends. And so in sport, like, let's just play this out. If it's a basketball game, the peak moment doesn't have to be the best possible moment. It's just like a big moment that stands out. The kids are going to remember the game based on that moment. But then they also remember it based on how the game ends. And for just about every young athlete, the game ends with the car ride home. How is the car ride home? How does it usually play out for kids? They sit in the back seat, and well-meaning parents are coaching, critiquing, maybe even criticizing. Why didn't you pass to him? Don't you think we might need to work on your free throws a little bit more? Why, when you went for the left-handed layup, do you keep jumping off the wrong foot? Is coach teaching you how to do that the right way? Mm. And again, our kids, when they're done with the game, they just want to move on to the next thing. Like, they don't care about all this analyzing stuff. They just want to move on to the next. They want to go get ice cream. They want to get home and move on to the next thing. It's us who, as parents, who feel this need to overanalyze everything, again, because we want what's best for them. But parents need to realize what's best for them on the car ride home is to connect with them, not to correct them. So for me, like, one of the most helpful practices that I've done the last few years with my kids, because I've experienced the opposite of this, where I've tried to coach and correct, and I'm just like, I'm not getting any feedback, again, because they don't care as much as I want them to care. And so the question I always ask now, they get into the car ride home, and I say, is there anything from the game today you want to talk about? Can you guess what their answer is 99% of the time?
No.
Which
no one can make me for ice cream.
It kills me, because there's a long list of things that I want to talk about, right? There's a whole lot of things that I want to talk about. They don't want to talk about it. They're done with it. They played the game, and they want to move on to what's next. So for us, like, for the car ride home especially, it might be best just to find ways to connect with them, to turn on music that they like to listen to. Man, it could be awful parenting, but sometimes I just like give them my phone and say, hey, play a video game, de-stress. Let's try to get regulated again. I don't want the end of their youth sport game to be remembered by, Dad was disappointed, and I experienced that disappointment through him telling me what I could have done better the next time.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of today's episode with Brian Smith.
We've got more coming your way in part 2.
And if you haven't already, hit follow so you don't miss it when it drops.
And if you're enjoying Grit and Growth, tell a friend. It really helps us keep these conversations going.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you in part 2.